The attorney didn't say it like a warning. He said it the way someone might mention the weather, quietly, almost as an aside, while sliding the final papers across his desk. "Before you celebrate," he said, adjusting his glasses, "pretend the money is gone." That was it, no speech, no explanation, just a small pause afterward, as if he expected me to understand something he hadn't actually said. My grandmother's estate had just been settled. The paperwork was finished. The accounts were transferred. After months of legal formalities and probate delays, the inheritance was officially mine. It wasn't an unimaginable fortune, but it was more money than anyone in my family had ever received at once. I remember sitting there, holding the folder he had handed me, waiting for him to elaborate. He didn't. "Why?" I asked eventually. He leaned back in his chair, not defensive, not secretive, just calm. "Because the first thing people do when they hear about money," he said, "is start planning what it means for them." Then he stood, shook my hand, and walked me out. I didn't go out that night. There was a moment, when I got home, where celebration seemed like the natural response. Maybe dinner somewhere expensive. Maybe telling my sister, maybe calling a few cousins. Instead, the attorney's voice kept looping in my head. "Pretend the money is gone." It sounded overly cautious. Maybe even a little cynical. But my grandmother had always trusted this attorney. He had handled her affairs for decades. If he had felt the need to say something like that, there was probably a reason, so I decided to follow the advice exactly. No announcements, no hints, no lifestyle change. If anyone asked, I would say the estate was still tied up in paperwork. By midnight I had convinced myself the whole thing was unnecessary. By morning I realized it wasn't. The first message came from my cousin Daniel. We rarely spoke unless it was a holiday. "Hey, heard the estate might finally be wrapping up. How you holding up? Must be a lot to deal with." The tone was warm, friendly, almost concerned. I answered honestly. "Still sorting through legal stuff," he replied quickly. "Yeah, probate takes forever. Once it clears though, we should talk. I've been working on a business idea." I stared at the message for a long moment. Daniel had never once mentioned a business idea to me before. I put the phone down. Around 10 that morning my Aunt Linda called. She hadn't phoned me since the funeral months earlier. Her voice carried a softness I recognized from childhood visits, something maternal, almost protective. "How are you doing with everything?" she asked. "I'm okay. Your grandmother always loved you so much, I know." A pause stretched between us. Then she said, carefully, "Do you know how long the estate process usually takes?" "Still working through it," I said. Another pause. "Well," she said, "if anything comes through and you feel overwhelmed, families should support each other." The sentence floated there for a moment, vague but weighted. When we hung up, I noticed something strange. Not one person had asked about my grandmother. Only about the estate. Around noon I stopped by a small cafe near my apartment. I brought a notebook with me, trying to think about practical things, taxes, investments, the usual adult responsibilities that come with money. 2 tables away, I heard familiar voices. My sister Rachel, and Daniel. I hadn't told either of them where I was going. They hadn't noticed me yet. "I'm telling you," Daniel was saying quietly, leaning forward. "If the estate cleared already, there's no way she'd just sit on it." Rachel stirred her coffee. "She's cautious." "She's not that cautious," Rachel shrugged. "Well, she'll help if it makes sense. That's what Grandma would have wanted." Daniel nodded. "Exactly. Family investment." Neither of them sounded angry. They sounded confident, like they were discussing logistics. I stayed where I was, hidden partly by a pillar, listening longer than I should have. Daniel pulled out his phone. "If she inherited what I think she did, even 10% would cover the startup costs." Rachel nodded slowly. "She'll understand." It was strange. They weren't scheming in a dramatic way, no whispering, no plotting. They simply assumed access. As if my inheritance had already become a shared resource. I finished my coffee quietly and left without saying hello. That afternoon the attorney called. "Could you stop by the office for a moment?" he asked. "Did something happen?" "Nothing urgent," he said. "Just a follow-up conversation I think is worth having." When I arrived, he was exactly as calm as he had been the day before. He gestured for me to sit. "How has the first day been?" he asked. I hesitated. "Interesting." He smiled faintly as if he had heard that answer before. Then he opened a thin folder on his desk. "Something you should know," he said. "Whenever estates settle, people begin making inquiries. Inquiries, relatives, sometimes friends, occasionally business partners that appear suddenly." I felt my stomach tighten. "People have called you." "A few," he said. He didn't give names. "They usually phrase it as concern," he continued. "Or curiosity about timelines. And what do you tell them?" "The truth," he said calmly. "That financial details are private." He closed the folder. Then he looked directly at me. "The reason I suggested pretending the money is gone," he said, "is because it lets you see who remains when the expectation disappears." I thought about the cafe conversation, about Daniel's business idea, about my aunt's careful suggestion of family support. "I think I'm already seeing that," I said. He nodded slowly. "Most people aren't malicious," he said. "They just adapt quickly when opportunity appears." Over the next few weeks, I kept following the same rule. The inheritance existed only on paper. No loans, no investments with relatives, no discussions about amounts. Something interesting happened. Some people stopped asking. Daniel's messages slowed, then disappeared entirely. The business idea was never mentioned again. My aunt's calls returned to their normal once every few months pattern. Rachel remained around, but the tone shifted. Less confident, more neutral, and a few people surprised me. My friend Olivia, who had no idea about the inheritance at all, continued inviting me to cheap dinners the way she always had. My neighbor Marcus still knocked on my door, occasionally to borrow tools. Nothing about them changed, because nothing about me had changed in their eyes. One evening, about a month later, I opened the estate folder again. The numbers were still there. Real. Substantial. But the most valuable thing the attorney had given me wasn't the paperwork. It was that single sentence: "Pretend the money is gone." Because when I did, something quietly rearranged itself. Not with arguments. Not with confrontations. Just with absence. People who had been planning around the money slowly drifted away from it. And the few who stayed never needed to know it existed at all.